for tuning in for another episode of Will Work for Patients, a free advice podcast dedicated to help chiropractors get on purpose and grow their practices. Get ready to tune in and turn up the volume of your practice marketing. And now, turning up the volume on his mic, big-time chiropractic advocate and your host, here is Frank Sardella.
Have you announce me wherever I go in life. Wouldn't that be cool? Me, I'm Frank Sardella, and I'm so happy to be with you here again today in our podcast show. This show is free for you to not only give you marketing help in your practice, but to keep you on purpose, to keep you pumped up, and to keep you going. And that's my commitment in a grassroots effort to make a chiropractic world. So welcome. Hello, heroes of health, you activists of the autonomic. You know who you are. Hello, newcomers to the show. I know we have more than a few of you since the last show because I've definitely spoken to many of you. And I also want to give a shout out to some of my friends, the friends of the show. Dr. Frank Margella, Nashville, Tennessee, was our first guest on the show ever. He's also a client and friend, fellow Northeasterner. Dr. Matt Erickson here in Clearwater, Florida. He's my personal chiropractor, also client and friend, listener of the show. And how about Ernie Casera, another client of Screening Experts up there in South Jersey, Greater Philly area. Hello to you. And hello everyone else, and thanks for supporting the show and joining in. How about that episode 15, huh? Tony Rockcliffe and his wealth of knowledge on SEO. What a pioneer he was in the area, huh? I mean, this guy, when he heard about the internet, he went, what's that? Okay, that's way back in the old days. So this guy's been around for a while. I don't know about you, but I took a thing or two away from that. Make sure you check out our Facebook page, Twitter, Google+. All the information on things that Tony talked about, as well as how to get in contact with him, are posted there. You'll definitely find it on those pages, and you can find those pages via the website, willworkforpatients.com. He also offered a free consult with him, which was very generous. But it's definitely something you want to take advantage of. Thanks again, Tony, for gracing us with your presence. I'm going to skip the pleasantries I normally insert here about social media today because I wanted to tell you quickly about something that can really help you out practice marketing-wise. As you know, the purpose of this show is to motivate you, all of you, in a concerted effort to expand chiropractic the world over. And we're looking for things we can do that will assist you to do just that. Now, do you remember back in episode 9 when we had Desiree Lotz on the show with the product Instant CalMag C, yes? Well, we've been cooking up a few things since that show. As you know, I'm camped out here for a few weeks in Clearwater, Florida at her offices. One of the things that transpired recently is that we found a great way to use her product as a marketing tool, even more so than the benefits that, let's say, the product already has for assisting you in delivering treatment. I'm not a paid endorser of the product. I don't receive anything in return for speaking out about it, but as a chiropractic advocate, I do speak out about what I feel will honestly help you guys grow and expand your practices. I did a video for them on a webpage they have just for chiropractors, and if this intrigues you, I talk about in the video how you can use her product to attract patient potentials to actually show up in your office by the dozen, and I do mean literally 12 at a time. So if you're interested in a low-cost way to do that, very low-cost way actually, go to CalMag4Chiros.com. That's CalMag, the number 4, Chiros.com, okay? Enough said. I hope that helps you. So, you know, you're not going to believe this, but we have quite an episode planned here today. Make no mistake, quite an episode. In fact, I think we have a little mini-series brewing here. First, we spoke about getting on purpose with no passion, no patience. You remember that episode? And then we had Ron Cool on the show about sales and the need to get leads, and that leads are everywhere. And then Tony Rockcliffe showed us that an endless resource to generate leads is out there, and now we come to the big one, okay? Once these leads find and come in contact with you, what are they going to see? So how will they perceive you and what impression you will make on them, right? And therein lies the content of today's fun-filled show. You're going to love this one, I promise. Okay, today's episode is entitled Looks Are Everything. And what an applicable, if clever as usual, title. Today's guest is going to take you on a little tour of sorts. He's going to take you where I'm trying to get you, actually, out of your own head and into the heads of all those potential lifetime patients out there in your community. And then he's going to turn you around to look back at yourself through their eyes and see how you look to them. No, this isn't a look in the mirror, but this is a look from an entirely different perspective, okay? Eye-opening indeed, and something you probably even haven't ever considered or observed. And it really aligns with our coaching and training concepts here at Screening Experts, so I'm especially looking forward to this one. Very, very excited to get into it with you. Yes, sir. Okay, so today we're going to talk about identity, and specifically symbolic representation of your identity. I mean your logo, insignia, whatever you want to call it, okay? And today's guest is going to really dig in with us. He's going to get very detailed about this. I'm going to be very brief here, though. He's going to talk about what a logo actually isn't, because there's a lot more to it than you might think. You're thinking, wow, I can just draw a picture and throw it on a piece of paper here, or have somebody design it for me that maybe I know, or get it done cheap or whatever. He's going to tell you the ins and outs of this. This is absolutely fascinating to me. So we want to get into what a logo is, and then he's going to move into like what actually should come first, okay? And there's a whole bunch of things that you have to do before even positioning yourself this way. So we want to talk about that today. And then he's going to actually get into, you may not have realized there are actually more than one type of logo. And he's going to get into what those types are today. Quite fascinating. And of course, if that wasn't action-packed and fun-filled enough for you, of course I'm going to do a top 10 list for you, okay? Now, who is this masked man? Today's guest. Though he's quite an expert in what he does, let me tell you, I practically begged him to appear for yet another reason. That's just because, well, this is a man you just want to be hooked up with, okay? And I'm sure you'll see why in a moment. He graduated from University of New Mexico, Albuquerque, with a Bachelor in Fine Arts and in graphics. He designed award-winning corporate and product logos for 48 years, okay? He runs a full-service agency successfully for the last 43 years. He's won over 30 awards at local, regional, and national levels for creativity, guys, okay? An average logo designed by him has a shelf life of 15 to 20 years. Wow is all I can say. He's created more than, get this, 1,000 professional-level corporate and product logos and branding. What a resume, and I'm gushing as usual. So let the man speak for himself. Humble listeners, please welcome to Will Work for Patients, Mr. Jack Potter. Welcome to the show, Jack. How are you today?
Hi, Frank. Yeah, I'm very good, and I'm happy to be with you.
Good, good. We're so happy to have you here. You know I was very brief in your career, but, I was reading a little deeper into your bio, and you have such an interesting background. I'm intrigued. You said that you started out, I guess you had sort of a safe job as an art director, and something about $500 in the bank and a wife 8 months pregnant, and you went out to start your own firm.
This is very true. What happened was I had been working for some major agencies, and I didn't like the culture of the agencies, several of them, as a matter of fact. Didn't like how they made the decisions. I also didn't like that they weren't serving their customers as if they were themselves a customer. And I finally had enough. I guess it was kind of an emotional decision. Certainly wasn't one that was prudent at the time, but I jumped out on my own.
Wow.
And I successfully doubled my income the next month. And the next month I quadrupled it, and I said, this is looking pretty good.
Wow. And you haven't looked back since, huh?
Never looked back.
Yes. Now, you mentioned one thing in your bio. You said your track started with a design boutique.
Well, a design boutique is basically an adjunct to an advertising agency or agencies. I was a problem solver. And the major agencies, when they ran into areas that they did not have the expertise for, the smarter ones would hire professionals in that arena.
I see.
And mine happened to be logos and branding. So I did work for Doyle, Dane, Bernbach, and some of the biggies, as well as some of them small and medium-sized agencies.
Huh. Do you have any notable accounts or jobs you've done over the years that stick out in your mind as something that you really liked, sinking your teeth into?
Well, I've done over 250 companies that I've done work for.
Wow.
And 25 different industries. So it's kind of hard to pick one out and say, that's great. But the ones I enjoyed to work with the most were the smaller entrepreneurial-run companies, because I always had access to the guys at the top, and the guys at the top were used to making smart decisions. They were actually intelligent people to work with, and I always liked that.
Understood, yeah. And actually with the smaller businesses and the entrepreneurial types, you're speaking our language here on the show, so it's a perfect fit.
Right. Well, I am an entrepreneur, so I definitely speak entrepreneurese. I understand the thought process. It's
Excellent.
Easy for me to share common reality with folks.
Well, good. Well, maybe we can instill a little of that into our listeners today. It'd be awesome. All right. Well, let's get started. I just want to jump right in because we have such an action-packed agenda here today. And the first thing we always do in the show, Jack, as I told you, is the top 10 list, and I want to thank you for helping us keep precedent here. It's been tradition now that when we have a guest, we usually have the guest provide the top 10 list, and it looks like a blockbuster one you prepared here. So I'm just going to start running down rapid fire, and then we'll have you jump in and comment. Okay, so today's top 10 list. Now, Jack, I took the liberty of renaming this one a little bit because, after I read over this list, one thought kept coming to mind, and that was, uh-oh. So I'm going to call today's top 10 list Logo Creation Uh-ohs.
I like that actually better.
I had a hunch that you would. So let's jump right in. Number 10, hiring a family member to create your logo. Jack, there's got to be sort of a story behind this for sure. Tell me about that.
Well, more times than not, especially with these smaller entrepreneurial customers, sometimes I don't get to them in the very beginning when they start. I get to them a couple of years into it. They already have invested in a logo, and I dig in to find out where that came from. And I find out that their wife had 3 hours of art history, and therefore she was pretty good with drawing stuff up, so she drew up a logo.
Ah, I see.
Or their son, was in high school, and his art teacher said he was pretty good with graphics.
I see.
So he did up his father's logo, or something like that.
Wow. So could I expand on this and say maybe it's a little bit of keep emotion out of it and that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, it is. It's actually the theme of this whole exercise is the difference between a professional and an amateur and the way that you approach the field.
I'm glad you said that. Very well put. Okay, moving on. Number 9, designing your own logo. I think this is tantamount to hiring a family member, maybe even worse, huh?
Generally speaking, the person who's done that suffers from I know best. And what I found is that, and this isn't true in all cases, but in many cases, when I'm talking to an entrepreneur and I try to speak of the forest, in other words, the bigger picture, his nose is so close to the bark of the tree that his field of view is 180 degrees of bark. And that same kind of idea for a logo, ultimately, if I can make this short, is they're too close to the problem to be able to see the bigger picture. I have someone external from that, exterior from that problem, solve that problem.
I agree. That's so much more than a slice of humble pie right there. All right. Number 8. I love this one. This is probably my favorite one on the list. Pay peanuts, get monkeys.
That happens so often. That people try to basically buy their logo by the pound. And what they get is something that's called a logo, but by definition, as we get into this, I'm going to define what a logo is. I want to define what it should be and how it should act. So you don't get that for almost no money. It takes some thought, some careful planning, and creativity, obviously.
Great. Well, essentially, you get what you pay for, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Number 7, borrowing, and borrowing is in quotes, borrowing another's logo. So does this happen a lot?
It does happen. People often think that no one's going to be looking around. Let me restate that. Some people think that they can get away with it, but the internet has actually made it much easier to find what's out there, and if anyone has a name like yours or a symbol like yours.
Sure.
Ultimately, this quote-unquote inexpensive approach costs you dearly in court costs.
So you're not really getting ahead by doing that anyway. And let's just call a spade a spade. It is indeed stealing a logo.
Right. It's creative theft.
Understood. Good one. Number 6, hiring a $99.com. Comments?
I had a friend of mine just recently. I knew this to be true, but it's just a very recent situation where they decided that they were going to save a buck and go out to hire $99.com. They put it into the system. They got back, I think, 250 logos, if you can believe that. Not one of them was acceptable.
Wow.
Talk about a horrendous waste of time.
So again, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
All right. Appropriately in number 5, Fiverr.com is a website, Fiver, which has, you can put up any services that you can do on that website and sell them, but the key is you have to have a service that starts at $5 that you do, and people do voiceovers and all kinds of things, yeah?
Right. I can't imagine any kind of a professional product coming out of that. Now, I don't have any personal experience, but I've
Sure.
heard stories of people trying to use that service. And maybe in some cases,
Yeah.
it's fine. But most often, these people are out of country.
Yeah, it's true.
And I don't know that they have the same reality as someone with that orientation when you're
Sure.
talking about symbols for business.
Right. And not to mention, not that it's not professional, but yeah, I get the idea. It's like a lot of amateurs and things like that. And I think maybe this sort of fits almost under hiring a $99.com type of thing, yeah?
Same thing, only worse.
Yeah, same thing, only worse. So good. Okay, if they're charging you $5 for it, it's probably worth $5. Okay. Number 4, insisting you know best to an expert who knows better. Jack, I'm assuming this one really hits home to someone in your industry for 40 some odd years, yeah?
Yes, it's actually quite embarrassing. I'm actually embarrassed for the person who has that viewpoint.
Really?
Yeah.
Very
Because
interesting.
it's sort of like saying to the plumber, telling him, hiring him to fix it, and then telling him what to do. We've all heard jokes about that. It's $40 an hour for plumbing and $100 an hour if you help.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. Number 3 is an interesting one to me. Contest of amateurs and hope for professional outcome. Is this really something that people do? They have a contest?
Yeah, and more often than not, I've seen it in cities and government-run agencies where
Really?
they think they can save a buck and be a hero, and then they get a bunch of amateurs pumped up about a contest where they'll win. And it's never the kind of money that a real logo would cost.
Right.
$500 or $1,000, so they get excited. And then you have 10, 20, 30, 40 people busily creating something, usually without a lot of information.
Mm.
And then someone randomly goes through and picks, I like that one the best.
So
And
it's
may or may not have anything to do with the subject. As an example, this gets so ridiculous that one time I had a client, I showed him what I thought was the best of the bunch. I probably showed him 15 logos.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I hate it. And I said, okay, I understand. What is it that you hate? He says, well, I don't know, but I just hate it.
Uh-huh.
And I said, okay, well, answer me some questions. And I gave him 10 questions probably. Ultimately, it was the color. And it was green, and I hate green. So I said, what if we make it blue? He says, oh, well, that would be different. So I showed it to him in blue, and he says, wow, that's great. So sometimes it's just a matter of a simple difference in taste or color scheme or whatever. But
Sure.
many times the poor designer isn't given that list of do's and don'ts and things that are okay and things that aren't okay from the person who's buying them. Like,
So-
I would never accept a pink logo as an example.
I'm sure some people in that contest, the ones who didn't win, could probably have winners if they just knew
Exactly.
what the heck was going on. Yeah.
It's criteria.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I try to establish with my clients is let's define what the scope of the project is and what are the criteria for success.
Wow. I hope you guys are getting this out there because this is really starting to give us some insight into what we're talking about here today. Excellent point, Jack. Thank you. Number 2, putting it in the hands of a professional and then telling them what to do. So that's your plumber example, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I can only imagine what you do to deal with that. I'd be pretty frustrated.
People have opinions. We know that.
Well, they do, yes.
And they may or may not be appropriate. And I'm always willing to listen to an opinion, but if they hire me as a professional, they should be at least smart enough to listen to what I have to say. They can vote with their checkbook, but they should listen to what I have to say, and maybe I can save them a lot of money and not having to reprint later.
Right.
You can imagine if a logo can last for 15 or 20 years, that's a heck of a savings.
That's true. Excellent point. Okay, well, that brings us to the top of the list. The number 1 logo creation Jack, I'm going to let you read this one.
Creating a logo before doing proper professional research.
That one just sounds like it's going to lead us right into the meat and potatoes of today. Comment.
Yeah. Well, the truth of the matter is that I don't know what's the best logo for a client.
Mm-hmm.
The client rarely knows what's the best logo for the client. And the best person to ask is a potential buyer, user, client, customer.
Yeah.
They're the ones who will tell us what we need to know and what direction we should be moving in.
That makes sense. So, well, I guess since we're talking about their identity here and that there's so much more to the logo making process than obviously we thought, I guess we should just jump right in and you can start maybe defining what it is, what it isn't, and what have you.
Sure. Well, what a logo isn't the panacea to all of your marketing problems. People think, well, I need a logo and that's going to get me business. Well, eventually it will help you get business. But even if you have millions of dollars like the Coca-Cola company, it took them 50, 60 years to get to become a household name.
I see.
And the logo isn't particularly fabulous as a logo. It's just millions of dollars of advertising pounding in your head. And most people that are small entrepreneurs don't have that kind of money to pound an image into someone's head.
I see.
So they have to be more right in the beginning than wrong.
Good point. Would you say that most of the people that you run into in the course of business sort of have that viewpoint that this is like their end-all be-all of all marketing? You get the right logo, they're going to just magnetically attract to them?
I'd say, to be fair, maybe a third of them. I quickly disabuse them of that idea.
Okay, well, good. And I'd like to give my audience the benefit of the doubt. These chiropractors are very on purpose, and they're pretty well aware that they have to do more than just, slap up a logo or a shingle. And we're in a profession that really does need to promote to get out there. So we'll hopefully their percentages are, a little better than a third, but thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so when we're talking about what a logo isn't and all that, I guess there's something about the whole viewpoint of the thing, yeah?
Well, it is about the customer's viewpoint of you. In other words, from their viewpoint, looking back at you, what do they see? I had a conversation yesterday with a lady that I was creating a logo for her company, and she showed me some things she liked, and I asked her why. And she said, they're pretty. And I said, great, they are pretty. Well, what do they say about your business? Can I tell from looking at your symbol, or the symbol that you like, what it is that you do in the world would I buy from you? And if you can't answer that question, you're wasting your money.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I see that happen all the time. I think I've been guilty of that before myself. You see something that just looks brilliant to you, and maybe it's really aesthetic, but not necessarily a statement that you want people to perceive.
Or a symbol that indicates something to them. In other words, a logo can't do it all, but it certainly can indicate a direction that you're moving. Even if it's, air freight, there should be some kind of a motion of a plane or a bird or something that gets across the idea that you're moving, or a race car or whatever it might be.
I see.
So when they see it, they go, I understand. We don't want them going, what is that?
Of course. Okay, so anything else on what a logo isn't then?
Well, one of the things it isn't is the starting point to your marketing endeavor. It's actually more like about item number 6.
Wow.
The truth is that what needs to happen first, and I don't want to get on a bandwagon here, but it's the point that most people miss, is that if we don't do proper surveys of potential customers or clients to find out what they need and want, some be, do, and have about that arena. In other words, what are their hot buttons? What would you have to be or do or have for them to buy from you? And with all that data, then we could position you in the field. And that's the next thing we want to talk about. So the starting point is not a logo.
I see.
It certainly is in there, and it certainly is important, but it isn't the first thing that we do.
So it really is all about the research in this area.
Correct.
Absolutely. And here comes that magical word, surveys, again. Our last episode, Tony Rockcliffe, SEO expert, was talking about keyword research on the internet is the 21st century survey technology. And it's so funny, this word survey just keeps coming up more and more and more, in marketing. And logos are no different.
Well, the first item in marketing is finding out what's needed and wanted.
Yeah.
If you've got the best buggy whip in the world or the best sealing wax, and there's no market for it, it doesn't matter what you say, what you do, and how pretty it is. It won't be purchased.
Right.
So in chiropractic, most everyone at least knows about it, but what are your differentiators? Anyone in the field can put a neck in place.
Of course.
What's the difference?
Yes.
Why would I come to you as opposed to someone else? And those questions need to get answered. And they need to get answered not by the chiropractor himself or the optometrist himself or the manufacturer himself, but by the customer or client.
Wow, love it.
With that done, in other words, knowing what those hot buttons are and what should you be and do and have to get more customers, then we look for the proper way to position you in the field.
I see. So positioning essentially is just aligning with something real, I guess, to the audience, yeah?
Yeah, as an example, a long time ago, probably 50 years ago, Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola were battling out for number one. And they were number one was number one and one was number two, back and forth, back and forth.
I remember.
And 7-Up came along and they were number 19, but they were in what Trout and Reese says, a cola ladder. They were in a ladder in someone's mind, and they were way down towards the bottom. And somebody at 7-Up was particularly bright one day, and they said, well, you know, we're really not a cola. So they did some surveying, and then they came up with a branding action, a branding slogan, the Un-Cola. And it caught on like wildfire to the people who like to be avant-garde, who like to be different.
That was a great campaign. I remember that, the Un-Cola.
It lasted 20-something years, and then they went off into something else, and I think they lost market share. They are not a cola. They are a lemon lime drink.
No, it's true. And then I think Coke released Sprite, and it was all over after they dropped their campaign that was working.
Right. So positioning is important, but also staying with a position that is working is important.
I see.
If suddenly it's found out that lime juice or lemon juice is bad for you, then that's a whole different thing, and then you got to retool.
Right.
What else can I offer this public now?
I see. Let me ask you a question. You mentioned something called instant impression testing that I'm very interested in. It seems like this is leading right into that. So maybe you can tell us what that means and what comes first.
Well, actually, it's something that you do with a piece of art directly to customers or potential customers. As an example, if I was doing a logo for you, Frank, and I had narrowed, let's say we started off with 10 logos and we narrowed it down to 3. I could go to your clients and ask them a series of very specific questions that'll get me an answer of which of those logos would most likely people reach for the product or the service based on that particular logo.
Wow.
So it takes it out of my hands, I think I'm a professional, this is the way you should go, into what does the customer say? See, I can narrow it down, and I can do a beautiful job of creating something very aesthetic and very pleasing. But if it's between 3 logos, all of which are good, and one of which gets people to reach for the wallet, that's the one we want. Instant impression testing does that.
I see that. I'm starting to see where this is all going, Jack. It seems there's a hierarchy here, right? It's like the client himself, the person who desires the logo, has sort of holds the bottom rung of the ladder. The next one up, not necessarily at the top, is a person like yourself designing, and the top dog really is the end user of the product and what the impression is going to be on him, regardless of what the experts say, yeah?
Absolutely correct. In fact, that is the only word that matters. The guy who can ring your cash register. Yeah,
absolutely. So there's something for the listeners to take away for sure. That's a big one. Okay. I want to get into types of logos here. So let's talk about those 3 types of logos now. You mentioned 3 types of logos to me, and just the fact that there were types just intrigued me. So explain, please.
Well, there's a hierarchy of logos that I've discovered. And it starts off with the lowest level called a typeface logo. And that's where you pick a particular typeface and you do something fancy with it, or you create a typeface specifically for your client that stands out from normal typefaces.
I see.
And that's probably the bottom rung as far as creativity in most cases, and also in price.
So this would be, just for instance, Coca-Cola, when they have Coke written in that font on the can, this is a typeface logo?
Right, and Coca-Cola logo is a typeface logo.
Got it.
Not the bottle that comes with it, that's a symbol.
Right.
But the monogram, that scripty type, which has been around for a long time and actually been redone maybe 10 times, that is a typeface logo.
Understood.
Then they later on added a symbol with it, so that gets into another category in a minute we'll talk about.
Okay. So typeface logo, and then...
monogram. That's the next category. And monogram came from the days when men used to have their initials embroidered on the cuffs of their dress shirts. And basically, it's just hooking 2 or 3 or 4 letters together in a pleasing way for a company that goes by initials, like 3M, which used to be Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, later on changed to 3M.
Love it. Never knew that either.
RCA.
RCA, yeah. Or
ABC, CBS.
Right. BP, British Petroleum.
Correct.
Got it. Monogram.
So that's a little more expensive to work. It's a little bit more work to make the letters work in such a way that sometimes they can even form a symbol.
I see. Understood.
And then that leads me to the next category, which is a symbol.
Okay.
Symbol is pretty straightforward. What its job is to in some way communicate a message about the client, my client.
I see.
What is it that they do? What is it they're striving for? What quest are they on, etc.
So the symbol sort of goes hand in hand with the message a little bit.
It is, many times it can be at least part of the message, if not the whole message.
Yeah.
And in this over-communicated world out there, you'll find that people are reading less, and the symbols communicate faster and better in many cases than the written word.
Right. So, and yeah, I agree with that. And, we keep alluding to the soft drink industry. It's amazing how much marketing they have to do to keep dumping soft drinks down people. But, whereas Coke had a typeface logo, I guess, Pepsi with their circle with the wave in it, their program was, I think, Catch the Wave for years or whatever, would be a symbol, certainly a symbol logo. Yeah.
Well, and they also have a type font that someone created for them. I forgot what it's called, but it's something Pepsi. And so the font is actually created for them. So they use a combination, which is the next type of logo that I call hybrid. You could have a typeface with a symbol. You could have a monogram with a symbol.
I see. That makes sense. Well, this is all stuff to consider that we probably didn't even realize. So.
Well, I hope I helped with that.
No, absolutely. It certainly clears it up because it just, it just shows you, even though a logo is supposed to be a simplicity, it's not necessarily a simplicity to just slap one together. There's a lot of thought that goes into this.
Yeah.
As far as types of logos and different things you've seen over the years in your own travels and your own work, and let's say the works of others, if you're like me, you probably admire the work of others that you've seen, or when you see a really good campaign, you go, wow, what a good campaign that was. Anything that sticks out in your mind that you're like, wow, that make you go, wow? What makes Jack Potter go, wow?
Well, one of my favorites, and that's not because I use an apple, but I like the Apple logo because of its simplicity.
Yeah.
And I like the bite out of it. And a lot of people don't get that, but the logo is associated with education. And taking a bite of the apple, of knowledge, from the tree of knowledge.
Wow. That is way deeper than any of us thought.
It's not just a simple apple because it's Apple computer.
Wow, you just brought some severe depth to our show here. I hope everyone can handle it. Wow, that's fantastic. And I likewise admire that campaign as well. I always love their logo. Good example. Well, that's good. Well, thank you for that. This has been very enlightening. What we normally do here is we do a little recap, and maybe you can help me with the recap and do a few comments here and there. But I guess what we talked about today essentially is, your logo is represents your identity. It's symbolic representation of who you are, and there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. Okay, and so your logo, your insignia, whatever you want to call it, it's going to reflect a lot of things about you, and there's a lot of things to consider. So in where you were talking about what a logo isn't, what should the listeners take away? You mentioned it's not a panacea to all your marketing. You mentioned something about viewpoint and how it's not a starting point. So what would you say would be the takeaway point on that people should understand?
Well, I think that the overall umbrella that we need to take a look at is that there needs to be a plan for your marketing, of which a logo and branding are a part of.
I like it.
Research is a part of. And then once those 3 things are accomplished, then an implementation program to launch it, and then a sort of recap survey to find out how we're doing. In warfare, the worst thing that can happen is you send in a sortie or you send in some missiles into a target, and then you don't know for weeks sometimes what happened. Wow. In this case, when we launch a program, we need to have constant feedback as to how well it's doing. The more feedback, the faster, the less money we have to spend on things that are not working.
Wow. Excellent point, and I'm going to tell you what I like about that. In our coaching program, we have two specific sort of coined words, and our clients are going to love hearing this from you because the words they're probably most sick of hearing from us are the words recon and intelligence. And I use them a lot because they're so important in marketing and whatever, and sort of knowing what you're going up against before you go out there and try to promote. So certainly well stated, and I'm a huge fan of the fact that you said have a plan. Because I can't tell you how many people that we know and that we see just fly by the seat of their pants on this thing, and this is definitely something you can certainly waste a lot of money and time on without doing the proper research and having a plan to go from, yes?
Very correct. In fact, any plan is most often better than no plan.
Right. Understood. Good. Excellent point. I'm going to leave it at that. And then when you talk about what must come first, then just with an exclamation point, surveys. Once you have enough surveys, you can position your product. And once you position the product, before you actually put it out there, you've got to test it. Did I sum that up okay? Or would you say there's something more you want to add to that?
That is correct. That's a sequence of events. And then what occurs is, like I said before, once you've launched it, then you've got to resurvey to some degree to find out how is it doing and how we can improve the product.
Wow.
And or the service and or our image.
Yeah, that probably comes up as a weak point for people, that maybe they get all the way up to that point, but they don't resurvey to see how it's doing.
It's like putting a website up there and not changing it for 10 years.
Ah, good point. Excellent point. Yeah.
So it's a matter of, okay, what's current, what's happening, is our branding working for us? Mm-hmm. And is our tagline correct still? In other words, these things, it's an ongoing process. And time stream, you're moving in the time stream or you're standing still and it's moving past you.
Yeah, got it. And that's definitely a takeaway point, especially in this day and age where things change faster than they ever have in history.
Right, at the speed of light.
You're right. You're right, Jack. Good point. And then finally, 3 types of logos. I'm not sure. Takeaway point, I guess, is really just to know what they are and what the different uses for them would be. Is there a sort of takeaway point they should know about the different types of logos?
Well, research can tell us which one's going to be more effective.
I see. This is a point that someone like you takes on when you take on a project like this, yeah.
Yes, yeah. I can read from the surveys. I'm very good at translating what they're saying. Mm-hmm. Then I can see from that which thing is more often going to be the correct type. More often than not, that's a symbol, believe it or not.
Okay. Is there any other overall takeaway point that you think should be taken away from this?
Yes. One of the things that I try to do is really make myself an ally to the company that I'm working with. Mm-hmm. And that's really understanding what the goals, desires, etc. of my client personally as well as their business. Mm-hmm. So that I can think with them, and it's kind of a shorthand between me and my client. So when I present things to them, I know they're acceptable. It's a very fast way of working, but it takes a little work to get inside the head of the client and inside the head of their client.
Wow. You're definitely speaking our language with that one. We teach our clients how to get inside the head of prospects. So that definitely aligns. Thanks for that, Jack. Tremendously great list of points to go over, and I can tell listeners are going to take a lot away from this episode. So thanks for that. Okay, so the last word. Who gets the last word? I do. After all, it's my show. What should we take away from today's podcast? Well, if anything, I sincerely hope you take to heart one thing: perception. And to further clarify, identity. I hope that you realize that regardless of how you perceive yourself, there's always a different look through someone else's eyes and from a different viewpoint. And to properly communicate who you are, what you're about, your identity needs to communicate it so that perception from others matches what you want them to understand. Logos and other identifying factors. A symbol can be a powerful thing, and it's more than just a clever or a pretty picture. It's the start of a conversation, and hopefully done right, a wonderful relationship, which for you equates to a lifetime patient who lives a wellness lifestyle and who wants others to achieve the same. Hey, wouldn't it be amazing if we could look back on this moment and say this is where it all changed? Will today's episode be the turning point of the game? How about any of the other episodes? Ron Cool's talk on sales, prospects are everywhere, Tony Rockcliffe and SEO. One New Patient a Day is still our most popular episode by a landslide. It's our most listened to and downloaded episode by far. Any of these episodes, pick one. We have a growing number of topics. Will that be a turning point? Wouldn't it be great if we just made that the turning point? We looked back and said, wow, this is where all the success and the fun began. Okay, here, Jack, is where we go in the show over to our guest and let our listeners know how to get in touch with you. I definitely want to hook up our audience with you. I'm sure there are going to be some people who are interested in finding out more and also maybe having you help them out a little bit. So let's start out with how to get in contact with you.
Okay, well, the company name is Potter Marketing and Branding.
Okay.
The website URL is www.jb.potter.com. Email is jackpot, that's me,
Love it.
at jbpotter.com. And the phone number is 727-area, 812-8982.
So just to repeat here, so JB Potter, JB like boy, jbpotter.com on the website, and jackpot at jbpotter.com. The email, and then 727-812-8982 to contact you by phone. Yeah. Oh, good. And then allow me to put you on a spot a little bit. We always ask all the guests on the show to cough up a little bit of an offer or a break or something that you can, or a bone you can throw to the listeners. What could you do?
Well, I'd be very happy to talk with someone, read the phone for 30 minutes and get an idea of what their needs and wants are.
Okay.
Happy to do that. I might be able to guide them a little bit. Sometimes people come to me before they're really ready. They don't have the money. They're in the middle of something, whatever, and I can guide them a little bit and help them move in the right direction so that they actually can afford to do it the correct way.
Wonderful. I couldn't ask for anything more from you. Thank you for that. Okay, next episode. Well, as you know, we have a multitude of guests lined up for the show, and we're just buzzing with activity just to get all the guests taped. But rest assured, it'll be another big one, another blockbuster indeed. I will work for patients. Incidentally, so will Jack Potter. So will you? Come on, guys. Let's do this, huh? Jack, thanks again so much for being here. We learned so much today, so much more to this topic than I even thought there was going to be. Thanks for, giving of your time, to the show, and also as a follow-up for people to contact you after the show. Love that. We're going to be talking about you on social media as well and putting links to you. But as you know, our show is a grassroots effort to expand the chiropractic profession, and you really helped forward that today. So thank you so very much, Jack, for being here today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay, let's plug the free resources. YouTube, free videos you can use to promote chiropractic on your website. You can embed them. You can share them on social media. Go to willworkforpatients.com or screeningexperts.com. Scroll down to the bottom of the page for resources and look for free YouTube videos. Our blog, chiropracticmarketingadvice.com, is expanding. There's more and more helpful marketing articles there that will help you in your practice and to grow your practice. Listen, subscribe, download. Please go to willworkforpatients.com to find out all the social media, to share social media, to get onto the social media, see what we're posting. When you subscribe, when you download, and please share. We recommend Beyond Pod if you have an Android. I'm an Android user, and I love that app to tune in to the podcast. But if you're an iPhone user or you use iTunes, the podcast app is brilliant, and of course you can subscribe directly to the RSS feed. All the information, willworkforpatients.com, on all the different ways to subscribe. Remember, this is a grassroots effort to make a chiropractic world like we all want. So let's make every episode count, huh? I know I can count on you. So, my friends, we've come to the end of an enlightening episode. Thanks so very much for tuning in. On behalf of myself, the wonderfully experienced Jack Potter, our announcer Michelle, and the rest of the Screening Experts crew, I thank you so very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon for yet another thrilling episode of Will Work for Patients. So long.
Be sure to subscribe and share. Real Work for Patients has been brought to you courtesy of Screening Experts, bringing unscripted simplicity to chiropractic marketing complexity. Today's episode, copyright Screening Experts LLC, musical score composed and arranged by Frank Sardella ASCAP. For more information, visit screeningexperts.com.